Let's dive into some Bears trade rumors here on Chicago Bears Now. My name is Harrison Graham. Thanks for tuning in. And on today's show, we're going to look at three players in particular that have been connected to the Bears or who are currently on the Bears and could be on the move before the NFL trade deadline, which, of course, is in less than 3 weeks, October 31st. The Bears have a few games between now and then. They play the Vikings at home. They play the Raiders at home. Then they go to the Chargers. I think depending on those results could determine if whether or not Ryan Poles sells, buys, stands pat. So these next few weeks are critical depending on what direction you want to go in. Now, don't miss out. If the Bears make a trade, we're going to go live. I can promise you that. So subscribe, turn on your notifications. We got you covered here on the channel. If the Bears make a trade, we're going to go live to break it all down. So do not miss out. Hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. It is free. Let's start with the big one here. Could a Brian Burns trade happen? I think in general it could. Could the Bears be the team that trades for him? Well, Bleacher Report named the Bears one of two teams. Can't remember who they mentioned as the other one as a potential fit for Brian Burns. Here's Christopher Knox from Bleacher Report. He says if the Panthers hope to land a true number one receiver and then continue building around Bryce Young in 2024, they may have to consider dealing star pass rusher Brian Burns, something they refused to do in 2022. Let me just first say, thank you, Carolina, for DJ Moore. I mean, that's number one. I mean, just genius planning from Carolina to trade up for a quarterback and trade away the only receiver that said quarterback could throw to. That's worth a damn. Now, kudos to Ryan Poles for saying, yeah, that's the guy I want, but he was reportedly interested in Brian Burns as well. I wonder if there was a trade offer with Burns and not more in it that Poles would have taken. Well, too late now. DJ Moore is ours, and now Carolina's starving for a receiver so bad that they might be willing to trade Brian Burns to a team to get capital to then go get a receiver. More from Knox here. He says the Bears could also consider Burns, especially if Justin Fields continues to play Chicago out of the 2024 quarterback market. They have 2 first-round picks in next year's draft, plus $96.9 million in projected cap space. Now, you look at Brian Burns' numbers this year, 4 sacks in 5 games. He's back at it once again. 8 quarterback hits, 1 forced fumble. His pressure rate isn't as high this year, but you got to factor in. Carolina's kind of a mess right now. They're trying to figure out what they are as a football team. So I'm still very, very high on Brian Burns, and there's no doubt he would be an awesome fit on this defensive line. I like Yannick Ngakoue. I like DeMarcus Walker. Brian Burns is better, especially when it comes to Walker. Like, if you got Brian Burns and Ngakoue is your number 2 edge, then you're cooking, especially if one of your interior rushers can really get something going, which Javon Dexter, he's played better the last couple of weeks. All of that being said, and again, I love Brian Burns. There's almost no trade out there right now, though, where I would consider trading one of my first round picks if I'm Ryan Poles before the trade deadline. Maybe after the season there's some trade scenario where you're trading down, doing this, doing that, who knows. But I just think keeping those 2 picks makes way too much sense. Now, the Bears win their next 3 games and are 4-4 and they feel like they can make a push to the playoffs and they think their own pick isn't going to be crazy high. Maybe that changes your thinking, but still, I just like the idea of entering the offseason with 2 first-round picks if I'm Chicago. So I would be pretty hesitant to move one of them. There's no scenario where I'm trading the Carolina pick, and I'm not trading my own pick unless it's just some unreal trade that I can't move past from. So what do you guys think? Will the Bears make another trade before the deadline? I say another because they already traded Chase Claypool. Type Y for yes, type N for no. I'm going to say yes. I think they will make a trade of some level, whether it's minor, whether it's big, that remains to be seen. I do think a trade will happen, though. Type Y for yes, type N for no. We know Ryan Poles has been willing to make trades. Could trading Jaylen Johnson be one of those moves that Ryan Poles makes? Bleacher Report suggests the Bears could be trade deadline sellers, and they mentioned Jaylen Johnson is a, quote, great trade chip. He is currently slated to be a 2024 free agent. And yeah, I think this is the biggest decision over the next few months outside of the whole number 1 pick scenario, if that happens, that Ryan Poles is going to have to make. What do you do with Jaylen Johnson? Alex Ballantyne of Bleacher Report says that Johnson is the kind of player that could actually bring a return that helps the team's long-term future. There are a lot of teams that would be better with Johnson on their roster. He's still just 24 years old. The Bears could let those teams pay his next contract, and see what they can get for him. Now, I've been pretty consistent in the sense that I want Jaylen Johnson to be here. I like how he's played. I do acknowledge that at times he misses some games. He's played 13, 15, 11, and already missed 2 games this year. So he's never had major injury concerns, but it seems like he always is good to miss at least a couple of games. But I don't think I would trade Jaylon. I just don't. Like, I like Tyreek Stevenson. I like what I'm seeing out of Terrell Smith, but I just think at some point, like, if you want to be a good team, you have to keep good players and pay those players. Is Jaylen Johnson a superstar? No. Is he a fringe CB1, though, when he's healthy? Yeah. And I don't think you'd have to pay him CB1 money necessarily. So that's a guy I want to keep around, I think. Now, are there scenarios where I would consider trading him? Absolutely. But at this exact moment, I think keeping Jaylen Johnson makes more sense than trading him. More on Jaylen in just a minute, but I'll tell you what, Prize Picks is changing my life. I love daily fantasy sports, and Prize Picks is the best app out there to have fun on any given night. And yes, you can play every day. That's why it's called Daily Fantasy Sports. National Football League, college football, Major League Baseball, and a whole lot more. Get started with Prize Picks, skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game, and you're not playing against other players like pros and sharks. It's just you against the Prize Picks projection, and that's how it works. You pick 2 to 6 players, and whether they'll go for more or less than their stat projections for that week or that season, whatever it is. I got a pick 3 here for the Bears game on Sunday. More than 50.5 rushing yards for Justin Fields. Tricky weather conditions. This feels like a game where he could run a lot. Kirk Cousins, I'm going to go less on the passing yards. No Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison's status is somewhat in doubt. Windy conditions at Soldier Field, so I think he'll go less. And then DJ Moore, more than 59.5 receiving yards. I don't think he'll go crazy, 200 plus or anything like that. May not even hit 100 yards this week with the weather, but 59.5, I feel good about him hitting that number. Go to prizepicks.com/CLNS or use code CLNS. That's going to get your deposit match up to $100. Get started with Prize Picks today. You're going to have fun all season long, all year round, because you can do it in all different sports. Now, I do want to do kind of a little rapid fire here. Reasons to consider trading Jaylen Johnson, because there are a few. Number one, I do think you could get a day 2 draft pick. Think about a couple of contenders. Buffalo lost Tre'Davious White. Maybe they're interested in trading for a corner. Dallas lost Trayvon Diggs, and they have not played nearly as good on defense without him. They might be looking for a corner. If you can get a second-round pick in particular, that's enticing. Third-round pick, I might hold off because even if I let him walk in free agency, you might get a third-round comp pick in return. I'd rather play that out and see if you can keep him. Number 2, he has had some injuries. If you're worried about that long-term, moving him now, especially if you do get a premium pick, could make some sense. Now, again, he hasn't had any major injuries, but he's had some nicks and knacks that have caused him to miss some games, so that is something to consider. Number 3, the emergence of Terrell Smith, the 5th-round rookie out of Minnesota, played really well against Washington. He's was competing with Tyreek Stevenson in training camp, so he's done some good things. Speaking of which, Tyreek Stevenson is improving. So, there's a thought you could go with Tyreek Stevenson, Terrell Smith as your outside guys, with Kyler Gordon as your nickel. Leaves you thin at corner, but that thought is out there. And then number 5, obviously, in this scenario, you're not paying him at least a decent-sized contract. Even if you don't pay him top-tier money, it's still probably going to be over $10 million per year. That being said, I'm still team pay Jaylen Johnson. You have $97 million in cap space. He's a good football player. He's a leader on this defense. I just think there's too many good reasons to keep him around. Like, I'm not in the business of getting rid of good football players just because. So I would keep him. I would pay him. If a team offers me a first, I'm obviously going to consider it. I don't think they will. If I get offered a second, sure, I'm going to think about it, but I would still keep him around in most scenarios. Now, what say you? I'm going to throw out the scenario of a second-round pick. Would you trade Jaylen Johnson for a second-round pick? Type T for trade or P for pass. I think that's where it gets tricky. If it's a first, you for sure do it. If it's a third, I think you keep him. If it's a second, we'll see what Ryan Poles does. T for trade, P for pass when it comes to Jaylen Johnson. Let's talk about another guy who's in a contract here. Darnell Mooney, NFL.com listed Mooney as a trade candidate. Connection with Justin Fields has been hit and miss this year. He's had a couple of nice games. His other 3 games, not so much. He is currently slated to be a free agent next year, just like Jaylen Johnson. You look at Mooney's season so far, not great, right? Now, it's really just 4 games. He left very early in one game. He had over 50 yards one game, over 50 yards in another game. Those are two solid outputs. The other two games, he's had one catch for 1 or 0 yards. So, and Fields has missed him a couple times. It's not like there hadn't been opportunities. So the connection's just been slightly off. I still like Darnell Mooney. I think he's a player you could still give a second contract to, by the way. Here's Kevin Patra on NFL.com, though. He says, Chicago already traded Chase Claypool this season, so shipping Mooney out would be a dent to the receiver core. However, with Mooney playing out the final year of his contract, the split now could offer Chicago more of a return than it would by him playing out the string. I just don't think you can trade him, man. Like, if you're going to give Justin Fields the opportunity to be the guy here long term, you can't trade Darnell Mooney. You're going to go with DJ Moore and a bunch of unproven players at receiver? Like, that's not fair to Justin. That is not a fair evaluation. I think once you decided the Chase Claypool saga had come to an end, you're keeping Darnell Mooney through at least the end of this season. Like, even if that connection's slightly off, he's still a threat. He's still a guy that can get behind the defense and draw attention. You trade him away, DJ Moore is going to get double teamed on every single play. Like, you can't do that. So, I'm keeping Darnell Mooney, even if that means risking losing him in the offseason. Like, I'm not going to trade him. And realistically, what would you get for him right now? Maybe a third? Like, I don't think you're getting more than a third. And if that's the case, I'd rather just keep him. And if I lose him in the offseason and have to get a comp pick in return the next year or whatever the case may be, so be it. But I'm not trading Darnell Mooney right now. Like, your quarterback's finally starting to cook. Your offense is finally starting to go. I'm not trading my number 2 receiver as these things are starting to happen. That's just me. Now, pick one to pay long term. That's a different question. If you could only keep one of these, if you're Ryan Poles and you're only budgeting for one, who you keeping? Who you paying? Type JJ for Jaylen Johnson. Type DM for Darnell Mooney. Here's what you guys think. I think this is an interesting discussion when it comes to the Chicago Bears' future. Appreciate everybody for tuning in to our trade rumors segment. I don't think a Brian Burns trade is likely. I can't imagine Ryan Poles is trading a first-round pick right now. But Jaylen Johnson, Darnell Mooney, big decisions ahead, not only at the deadline, but long-term when it comes to those two players. I would keep both, but we'll see what happens when it comes to Johnson and Mooney.